So BRICS has 5 important countries. You have Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. An exclusive video on the future of BRICS and if you should be preparing for the future, meaning if you should be upgrading your citizenship from one of the countries within the NATO to at least one or two of the countries within the BRICS bloc. The biggest difference between NATO and BRICS is that NATO is a strong Western military alliance. They're joined to the hip. An external entity attacks one of the NATO countries and then all get together and help each other out. And that is the power of the NATO. Even before we talk about the expansion, it's very important to understand, is the BRICS really strong? Now, 2 of the Asian countries already have conflicts at their border, so there is some military tension between the 2 countries. The other issue is the Russia issue.
This is an issue that is considered in Beijing by the Chinese authorities. Then, of course, the meeting that takes place in Moscow, where China and Russia are coming closer and closer.
So what's all this excitement to do with BRICS expansion? There are 5 countries in the BRICS bloc. Why are so many other countries all excited and gearing and running behind the BRICS bloc, wanting to be a member of the BRICS? How does this expanded BRICS fare against the NATO? Does it blow NATO out of the water? We're going to discuss this in a lot of detail. I got a lot of interest from the community asking me to provide my assessment analysis on this topic and to make an exclusive video on the future of BRICS and if you should be preparing for the future, meaning if you should be upgrading your citizenship from one of the countries within the NATO to at least one or two of the countries within the BRICS bloc. Towards the end, I'm also going to point you towards a video, all-important video, where you can obtain 2 citizenships within the BRICS bloc of countries. So make sure to watch right through till the end. All right, so BRICS has 5 important countries. You have Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. A lot of other notable countries like Argentina, UAE have expressed extreme interest in joining the BRICS bloc. Obviously, they feel alienated. Their first choice would have been NATO for all this while, but now with the new direction the new turn the world is taking, everyone seems to be excited about joining the BRICS. What is all this excitement about? Well, it's very important to understand the NATO makeup. It's mostly Western countries. The biggest difference between NATO and BRICS is that NATO is a strong Western military alliance. They're joined to the hip. An external entity attacks one of the NATO countries and then all get together and help each other out, and that is the power of the NATO. It's a very strong military alliance. It's a coveted or premium membership in that bloc. A lot of developing or emerging or third world countries aren't able to secure their membership within the NATO. It has been historically a very premium membership alliance. Now, if you look at the BRICS bloc, what happens if the BRICS expands? Now, it's very important to understand one key difference, which is that the BRICS, unlike NATO, is not a military alliance. It's an economic alliance. It's an economic forum where these 5 countries get together, discuss economic opportunities, and see how they can achieve economic prosperity, which is very different from what the NATO is trying to achieve. NATO is more protectionary. It's more taking care of each other. They're already economically very strong. These countries are very powerful nations, and all they're looking to do is secure their economic interest. There is an attack, then be prepared, be ready to retaliate and give a very strong blow to anyone external trying to threaten the security and safety of NATO, which is very different from the fundamental principles of BRICS. Now, if you see the BRICS makeup, the very first thing, even before we talk about the expansion, it's very important to understand, is the BRICS really strong? Now, the very first striking difference between the existing BRICS and existing NATO is that NATO has some 30 plus countries. It has at least those 30 solid countries, which are very powerful military countries. If you look at the BRICS makeup, you have emerging economies, developing economies. Now, 2 of the Asian countries already have conflicts at their border. So there is some military tension between the two countries. So obviously there is some friction. Recently, China did not attend the G20 summit, which was a strong message from China that they are not aligned. So there's some misalignment clearly between the two Asian nations within the BRICS makeup. The other issue is the Russia issue. Russia is currently sanctioned. Now, a lot of these developing emerging economies have to maintain their relationship with other external Western-oriented organizations, in addition to IMF, where there's a lot of dependency on the IMF. So they have to maintain somewhat of a relationship with their Western counterparts. And with Russia being heavily sanctioned, they have to play a balancing act. Of course, they have to maintain their friendship or some support towards Russia, but at the same time, they cannot go all out and establish great, strong relationship or maintain great, strong relationships. There's going to be some friction because of the whole sanctioned situation. When you have only one country which is sanctioned, other countries are not sanctioned, there's going to be some restrictions or some limitations in that whole flexibility and freedom. So you have two major issues. The other bigger issue is South Africa is the only African nation, very different economic interests. There's not a whole lot of collaboration that I can see in there. And then Brazil, obviously the only Latin American nation, very different geography, very different economic interest. So yes, they can get together, but the amount of free trade because of the proximity and the geography is obviously very, very limited. So what is the collective strength of the BRICS at this point in time? One, it's small, it's only 5 countries. 2, they're geographically very separated. 3, the only 2 Asian nations have military tension going on, so they can only go as far, which is one of the issues. 4th, the Russian factor, which is a sanctioned country. So that's, again, somewhat of a situation going on. So the existing strength of the BRICS does not look that positive if you compare that with the NATO. But the biggest central issue remains that this is for economic trade and freedom, that is for military action. So when it comes to collective military support, NATO will always stand strong. It's together. When it comes to collective military support on the BRICS side, there is no framework, there is no mechanism to combat that. So in that regard, if you talk militarily, the NATO blows the BRICS out of the water. When you talk about the whole economic factor, on the NATO side, it's all Western countries. They're geographically clustered together, which is a definite advantage to the NATO side. Now, the next discussion is what's up with all the other nations, 2 notable nations. One is Argentina, second is UAE. There are a bunch of African nations that are all eager to join BRICS. Well, I feel they feel left out. Obviously, their dream was always NATO, but because NATO is so difficult to join, now with the whole geopolitical situation playing out, they see an opportunity. They feel that the Asian nations are developing. There's some future over there. So if they cannot join NATO, then at least let's be a part of the BRICS. It's more aligned to the whole non-Western side and see if we can strengthen the BRICS. Now, is there any future with BRICS? Well, militarily, I see no future because of the whole Asia situation, Russia sanction situation. So the near-term future does not look bright if you're considering the military strength. Economically, well, with the downturn that's going on and the recession that is looming in different areas, how much economic progress they're collectively going to come up with, we got to wait and watch. I don't see a great future right off the bat. Maybe, let's say 20, 30, 40, 50 years down the road, there could be some results. And the biggest thing you got to understand is that these are highly bureaucratic, developing third world nations in most cases. So obviously their governments are not that aligned. If you see the Western strength, they're all aligned. They know the direction that they're taking. But when it comes to the developing nations, their interests are very diversified. If you see the 2 Asian countries, they're direct competitors. So obviously that plays a huge role in this whole aspect. So is BRICS going to be more stronger, or do I see a bright future even if it expands? Well, not really, at least not in the next 20 to 30 years. Now the big question, should you be getting a citizenship, upgrading your citizenship from a NATO country to a BRICS? Well, I think you should not be upgrading, but I think you should be prepared. There are a lot of people who are very bullish about the future of the BRICS, and all the views presented are my personal opinion, but you've got to be prepared for the future. It does not hurt to upgrade or get that additional citizenship in at least one or two other countries within the BRICS bloc before the expansion. Once you have the expansion, you have more opportunities. But even with the given situation, it's always good to upgrade your membership. And if you want to learn how you can obtain two citizenships, you don't need citizenships in all the countries, obviously, but you need at least one or two citizenships within the BRICS block. And if you want to learn more about how to get these important vital citizenships so you are prepared for the future, make sure to hop on to this video. This talks about both these two options in a lot of detail. Before you go, make sure you're subscribed. Give me a thumbs up if you like this video, and catch you in the next one.